We build walls our whole lives. We're avoiding something simple, and that avoidance has a cost. It takes something from us, quietly, every day. It drains courage. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, he wrote in his private journal, he wrote, "You could leave life right now, and you should let that determine what you do. What you say, what you think, that's not a morbid thought. It's not about fear. It's a source of clarity, a startling one." Stoicism has this radical idea. Thinking about our finite time, it's not about fear. It's the ultimate tool for living with purpose, for living with profound bravery. So by the end of this, you'll have a framework. A practical one to transform your relationship with life's end, to turn it into a daily of courage. We'll uncover how ancient practices work, how they can dissolve modern anxiety, how remembering an ending, how that can give you the strength to begin. A Stoic's most life-affirming thought is that they will die. It sounds contradictory, but that's the core of Memento Mori. Remember, you must die, and it's not about dwelling in darkness or living in fear. It's a tool, a mental exercise, and its purpose is to wake you up, to pull you out of distraction and place you here vividly in the present. When you remember your time isn't unlimited, a quiet urgency settles in. Not panic, but clarity. All those tasks you put off, the difficult conversation, the project you'll start next year, they suddenly demand attention, because next year isn't a promise. It's only a hope. The Stoic turns that into a source of power. It becomes the lens, every trivial worry, every petty grievance seen for what it is, a waste of the precious, fleeting time you've been given. Seneca wrote about this. He argued it's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. Life is long enough, he said, if you know how to use it. He measured a life not by years but by depth, by the richness of its engagements, and this practice, remembering mortality, ties to another idea, Amor, Fati. The love of one's fate, embracing the entire arc of your existence, the beginning, the middle, the inevitable end, not with resignation but with a deep, affirmative yes. To love your fate is to accept its limits and then to pour yourself completely into the life within them. So how do you practice it without it becoming a weight? The ancient Stoics kept physical reminders, a skull on the desk, a coin, a ring. The object isn't important. Its purpose is a gentle, daily nudge. A modern version might be a note on your mirror or a calendar notification. One word, remember, you see it and you pause. You don't dwell on the end. You ask one question. If today were my last, would I be spending this hour, this conversation, this energy in this way? The answer reprioritizes everything. That looming email shrinks. The resentment from a slight evaporates. The desire to tell someone you love them grows stronger. What would you do differently today if you carried that truth in your pocket, not as a burden, as a compass? The one thing in your future that's certain and that you can't stop is your own end. That's a fact, and the Stoics built their whole practice around a simple idea from Epictetus. He said some things are up to us and some things are not. What's up to us, our judgments, our impulses, what we desire and what we do, our actions. Everything else isn't. Your reputation, your health, what other people do. And your death, putting that final event in the second category, the one outside your control. That's a kind of clarity. It's not a fearful thing, it's just a fact. And accepting that fact is where Stoic courage comes from. Because when you stop fighting a reality you can't change, you free up so much energy. All that energy can then go to the one thing you actually own. Your inner world, your character, your choices, how you respond. Epictetus said it directly. Don't wish for events to go as you want. Wish for them to go as they do, and your life goes smoothly. That's not giving up, it's alignment. You accept the storm you can't stop, so you can focus on steering the ship. Think of a sailor. they have no power over the storm. Or the wind, or the waves, that final storm comes for every voyage. What do they control? Their knowledge, the strength of their knots, a steady hand on the wheel. Their own courage. They don't waste effort cursing the weather. All their focus goes to navigating well, with honor. Your life is that ship. Your character is how you navigate. So here's something to try. List 3 things that worry you right now. Then, for each one, ask, is this within my control or outside it? Is it my judgment or the situation itself? Use that one certain event as your reference point, that end which is completely beyond you. It puts every other worry in a new light. You might see that most of what drains your courage is also external. And that leaves you free to focus your bravery where it actually matters. Picture your city from above, just a little grid of light, then your country, just a shape. Then the planet, a pale blue dot in the dark. That's the Stoic meditation, the view from above. Marcus Aurelius did this all the time. He'd mentally rise up. See his own struggles, his palace, his empire, not as the center of everything, as a brief flicker in an endless cosmos. He wrote about it. Think of the whole of existence. You're the tiniest part. Think of the whole of time. You get a brief, fleeting moment. This isn't to make you feel small. It's to free you when you see your life against that backdrop. Mountains that stood for eons, stars that will burn for millennia, your personal dramas shrink. They find their proper size, that argument you're replaying. That professional setback, that social slight, seen from here, they lose their weight. They become small waves on a vast, ancient ocean. Our fear of ending feels so large because we're too close. We're pressed against the canvas of our own story. This practice pulls you back to see the whole painting. Your life is a single brushstroke in a masterpiece that spans centuries. This doesn't erase your importance, it redefines it. Your courage isn't about conquering eternity. It's about making your one stroke with integrity and purpose. Right where you are, you can try this. Think of a worry that feels heavy today. Now picture yourself 1 year from now. How much will it matter then? Picture a decade from now, see it fading further, then take that final step. See your entire lifespan, from beginning to end, as a single line on the immense timeline of human history. Cities rose and fell before you. Cities will be built long after. Your worry from here is a momentary ripple. It doesn't disappear, but its power to paralyze you does. So what courage does this unlock? The courage to act because the stakes of embarrassment are so small. The courage to forgive because holding a grudge wastes your finite moment. The courage to create, to love, to speak your truth because your time to do so is brief and singular. When you carry this view, you stop waiting for permission. From a universe that's indifferent to your hesitation, you become the one who gives the permission to live fully now. So how does your most pressing concern look? When you hold it up against the silent, star-filled expanse of everything, courage for a Stoic means embracing the whole story of your life, the final chapter included. That's the core of Amor Fati, loving your fate. It's an active, wholehearted yes to everything that's happened, to what's happening now, to what will happen. Not resignation, a deep, affirmative yes, and that yes has to include the one thing we try to ignore our whole lives. Think of any great story. What gives it its power, its meaning? It's the fact that it ends. A story that never ends loses all shape, all urgency, the final page, the closing scene. That's what makes every earlier moment matter. It provides the frame. Your life is that story. Accepting its natural conclusion that isn't morbid. It's what lets you see the whole arc as something complete. And therefore, something profoundly beautiful. This is where Stoicism meets a kind of poetry. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche championed this same Stoic idea centuries later. He wrote that his formula for human greatness is Amor Fati, to want nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, to not just bear what's necessary but to love it. Marcus Aurelius was saying the same thing, urging acceptance of what nature demands. He wrote to accept everything which happens, even if it seems disagreeable, because it leads to the health of the universe. So how does this love work in practice? It starts by seeing your fate as a single, unbreakable thread. Every joy, every hardship, every mistake, every loss. And your final moment, they're all woven together. To love your fate is to refuse to pluck out the threads you dislike. You accept the fabric as a whole. This active acceptance dismantles regret. You stop seeing past events as errors to mourn. You start seeing them as the necessary steps that brought you here. To this understanding, we see a powerful echo of this today in stories of people who have faced a serious health challenge, a close call. They often speak not of fear, but of a startling clarity. A renewed, fierce love for the simple fact of being alive. The trivial worries fall away. What's left is a deep gratitude for the story itself, however long or short it may be. That's Amor Fati in action. A nearness to the frame makes the picture within it infinitely more precious. Here's a small way to begin. Think of one event from your past that you regret. A choice you wish you could change. Now try this reframe. Instead of seeing it as a mistake, see it as the necessary turn in your road. Without that turn, you wouldn't have gained the strength, the insight, the direction you have now. It was part of your fate. Can you find a way to not just accept it, but to feel a quiet gratitude for the person it forced you to become? This isn't saying the event was good. It's saying your life, with that event woven in, is still a life you can love. When you can do that with your past, you build the strength to do it with your future. All of it, you begin to write your story with the courage of someone who already loves the final page. You prepare for something, a job interview maybe, or a difficult talk, a project. You put in the work, and then there's that question, what if it doesn't work out? That space between your effort and the unknown result is where this old idea lives. The Stoic reserve clause, they had a word for it, hypexerces. It means you add a quiet, internal phrase to everything you set out to do. You throw yourself into it completely. But inside, you hold an acceptance. The outcome might not match the plan. You do your part, and then you add silently, fate permitting. This isn't doubt. It's a deeper kind of confidence. Your value, your courage gets placed in the effort itself. The result is just the next thing that happens. Seneca wrote about this. He used the image of a sailor. A good captain can do everything right. Check the ship, study the stars, plot the course. They set sail with determination. But they know the sea. A storm could come up. They might not reach the port they aimed for. The captain's excellence is in the preparation, the steady hand on the wheel. Not in controlling the weather. He said we should approach our tasks that way. We should say, I will sail across this sea if nothing prevents me. That shift builds a different courage. It draws a line between what's yours and what isn't. Your effort, your focus, your integrity, those are yours. The job offer, the other person's reaction, how your work is received, those are not. When that settles in, you can act with a boldness that isn't weighed down by expectation. You're not held hostage by a specific future anymore. You become someone taking right action now. Think of an athlete. They train for years for the Olympics. Every morning, every meal, every rep is an act of courage. Then, maybe a month before the games, they get hurt. That dream in that form is over. If their courage was only tied to the medal, it's a devastation. But if their courage was rooted in that reserve clause, their dedication itself stays whole. Their worth as an athlete, as someone who pursued excellence, is still intact. The external result, as much as they wanted it, was always fate permitting. This doesn't take away the disappointment. It just keeps the disappointment from destroying the meaning of the journey. So here's something to try. Think of one thing you're going after right now. A promotion, a hard conversation, a project. Take your intention and add those two words in your mind. fate permitting, say it to yourself. I will pursue this with all my skill, fate permitting. I will have this talk with care, fate permitting. I will finish this work as well as I can, fate permitting. Feel that slight shift. It's not a weakening. It's a kind of liberation. The anxiety about how it turns out starts to loosen, because your main job isn't to control what you can't control anymore. Your job is to bring your full self to the attempt. That's how remembering life's ultimate lack of guarantee, that final clause we all live under, becomes a source of fearless action. You commit fully, not because you're sure you'll succeed, but because the act of committed effort is itself the victory. The Stoics practiced something called Premeditatio Malorum. The premeditation of evils. It's not just accepting that bad things could happen. It's actively rehearsing them, which sounds grim, but the purpose is the opposite. It's a kind of mental training, a psychological vaccination. You deliberately walk through a feared scenario in your mind, and by doing that, you strip it of its greatest weapon, which is surprise. You confront the monster in daylight, and you often find it smaller than the shadow it cast. Seneca was a strong advocate. He advised people to periodically practice poverty, to set aside a few days and live on the scantiest, cheapest fare, to remind yourself you can live well with very little, that your happiness isn't held hostage by possessions. He wasn't promoting self-punishment, he was building immunity. He said we should send our hopes ahead of our fears. We should anticipate not just that we might lose things, but how we would respond with virtue if we did. That's the crucial distinction. This isn't pessimistic worrying. Worry is passive. It's a loop of anxiety about an outcome you dread. Premeditatio is active. It's strategic. It's a rehearsal for your character. You're not imagining the event to feel terrible. You're imagining it to practice your response, to prove to yourself in advance that you have the inner resources to meet it. Think of it like a fire drill. No one holds a fire drill hoping a fire will start. They do it so that if the alarm ever sounds, panic doesn't take over. The body knows the path to the exit. The mind knows the procedure. The event, if it comes, is met with trained calm. Premeditatio is a fire drill for the soul. You're mapping the exit route with your virtue. So a practical exercise. Take a common modern fear, losing your job. Instead of letting that thought haunt you as a vague catastrophe, you sit down for 2 minutes and walk through it deliberately. You imagine the conversation, the feeling of shock, then you move immediately to your response. You picture yourself taking a breath. You list your transferable skills. You consider the temporary steps you'd take to manage financially. You focus on the actions within your control, updating your resume, reaching out to your network, maintaining your daily discipline. You see yourself handling it not as a victim, but as a capable person navigating a difficult turn. You rehearse your character's performance. The goal isn't to manifest the event. It's to dismantle its power to terrorize you. When you've already faced it in your mind and seen a path forward, the real thing, if it arrives, loses its capacity to ambush your courage. You've already been there, you know the terrain. This applies directly to the ultimate fear. By calmly, periodically rehearsing the idea of your own finite time, you aren't inviting it closer. You are integrating its reality into your worldview. You are conducting the fire drill so that this awareness doesn't cause panic when it surfaces, but instead provides clarity. It becomes the steady background against which you make courageous choices. The challenge is this: spend just 2 minutes today. Pick one future event you quietly fear. A difficult diagnosis, a financial setback, a personal rejection. Don't dwell on the emotion of it. Move straight to the rehearsal. Walk through the first rational, virtuous steps you would take. Who would you talk to? What practical action is yours to own? How would you protect your character through it? This isn't about preparing for the worst. It's about discovering right now that you are stronger than your fears believe you to be. In ancient Rome, a general would parade through the streets after a victory. And there'd be a servant beside him whispering in his ear, "Memento Mori, remember you must die." Amid all the celebration, the crowds, the power that whisper was a tether, pulling him back, grounding him. The Stoics saw that truth not as something grim, but as a foundation for humility, for compassion. When you really take in that everyone shares the same destination, the person you admire, the one you fear, something shifts. The social hierarchy flattens out. That need to compare, to rank yourself, it starts to loosen, because the final measure is the same for all of us. This doesn't diminish your worth. It just puts everyone's worth on the same plane. Marcus Aurelius returned to this thought constantly. He'd write reminders about people who angered him, noting that soon enough both he and they would be resting. That moment of conflict long past. He wasn't dismissing what they did. He was placing the heat of the moment against the backdrop of time. And that context gives you a kind of courage, the courage to be authentic, because the fear of judgment weakens when you remember the judge is just as mortal, just as fleeting. It's the courage to show compassion, because you recognize the shared vulnerability underneath every mask. Every person is fighting a hard battle, and that battle happens inside the same finite span. So before your next high-pressure moment, a meeting, a difficult conversation, just pause for 5 seconds. Hold that one thought. Everyone in the room is on the same brief, one-way journey. That executive, that relative, they carry the same fragility you do. This isn't meant to make you sad. It's meant to dissolve the artificial barriers. So you see the human being first and their role second. From that place you can speak with a different strength, not ego but the steady courage of shared humanity. Your voice might calm down, your listening might become more genuine, your patience might expand. So here's a question to carry with you. How would your interactions change right now if you saw every person as a fellow traveler on the same brief journey? A leaf falls in autumn. It's not destroyed, it becomes soil. That image holds a Stoic idea. The Stoics saw the universe as one rational system. They called it the logos. Everything in it follows a shared, intelligent order, and in that order nothing is ever lost. It only changes form. Your life and its ending are part of that same cycle. Death isn't annihilation into nothing. It's a transformation, a reintegration. Your physical body is a temporary gathering of elements. One day it will disperse. Those same elements will nourish the earth. They'll feed new plants. They'll become part of other lives. It's the ultimate recycling program written into nature itself. This view can dissolve a specific terror, the fear of non-existence, the fear of blinking out. But if you see yourself as a brief, conscious expression of a universe that's constantly remaking itself, that fear softens. You don't vanish, you return. You become part of the ongoing story of everything. Marcus Aurelius returned to this thought for comfort. He wrote to himself. He reminded his soul it was only a brief sojourn in a little body. He said, your lifetime is a moment. Your substance is ever-changing. Your perception is dim. Your entire physical body is destined to decay and disperse. But then he points to what happens next. These elements you're made of will be used again by nature as she needs them. They become part of other forms. He saw his own body as a handful of earth, soon returned to the earth to nourish new life. And if the soul persisted, he believed it would be received back into the rational principle, the logos from which it came. This wasn't a morbid fixation. It was a meditation on continuity, on being a participant in something vastly larger than his individual self. You can connect this to a modern understanding. Our ecological awareness shows us this truth in real time. We are literally stardust, the carbon in our cells, the iron in our blood. These atoms were forged in ancient stars. They've been part of oceans, mountains, other living beings for billions of years. Our bodies are on loan from the planet. We are temporary custodians of this incredible collection of materials. Seeing yourself this way as part of a sustainable, endless physical system can be a deeply comforting perspective, a courageous perspective. It means you are never separate. You are always connected to the whole. Your existence is a conversation with everything that came before and everything that will come after. So here is a simple practice. A powerful one. Spend a few moments in nature, a park, your backyard, a potted plant. Observe the cycles. See the new green shoot pushing from the soil, fed by last year's fallen leaves. Watch a stream flow, its water constantly moving and changing, yet always part of the greater body of water. In that quiet observation, ask yourself, where do I see my own story in this cycle? Can I feel, even for a moment, that I am not a visitor to this world, but an expression of it? This reflection doesn't erase the pain of loss. It doesn't erase the natural desire for a long life. But it can build a foundation of courage, a foundation so solid that the fear of ending no longer dictates how you live. You begin to act not as a solitary figure facing an abyss, but as a conscious part of a magnificent, ongoing process. Courage isn't about not feeling fear, it's about knowing what to be afraid of. That's the Stoic view. The Greeks had a word for it, andreia, and they didn't see it as a feeling. It was a virtue, one of the four main virtues, along with wisdom and justice and moderation. For them, courage is a choice. It's an action you take after you've judged the situation. It's knowing what's actually worth defending and then staying there to defend it, even when everything in you wants to leave. That's the key. Stoicism doesn't tell you to get rid of that first jolt of fear. That's just a reaction. It tells you not to let that reaction take over. They called those reactions passions, fear, anger, and the goal was to face them with reason. To look at them, is this fear warning me about a real danger to my character, to my virtue, or is it just warning me about a threat to my comfort, or my reputation, or my plans? Thinking about your limited time becomes the main tool for this. When you hold the fact of your finite days up next to a fear, it asks a clear question. Is this thing I'm afraid of actually worth the price of my life? Is it worth spending my limited, irreplaceable time being controlled by it? This is how remembering you'll die trains courage. It forces you to rank your values, the fear of embarrassment, the fear of losing money, even the fear of physical pain. They all get smaller when you measure them against the one real goal, to live and to die with integrity. It gives you the resolve to do the right thing, not because the fear is gone, but because doing the right thing has become more important than the fear. Epictetus made a strong point here. He taught that you aren't just a body that can be injured. You are, at your core, a will, a capacity to choose. They can chain your leg, he said. They can take what you own, they can even kill you, but if your will is still committed to virtue, if you choose to act with courage and justice, then that will can't be harmed or taken. Your character is the one fortress that can't be breached. That's where the Stoic finds the ability to act without being ruled by fear. Not a promise of safety, but the solid knowledge that your core self stays whole as long as you choose virtue. Think of a modern example. A whistleblower in a big company sees something that's seriously wrong. Speaking up means risking everything, their career, their income, their relationships at work. There's a real social death waiting, being pushed out, becoming an outsider. The fear is natural and it's strong. But if that person has, even without realizing it, done this Stoic kind of thinking, a deeper question comes up. When I'm at the end of my life, will I look back and be proud that I stayed quiet to keep a good job? Or will I respect the person I chose to be by telling a hard truth? The courageous action isn't taken because the fear of punishment disappears. It's taken because the commitment to justice becomes more essential than the fear. Thinking about the end clarifies what's worth ending for, so here's something to consider. Find one place in your life right now where you feel a tightness of fear. It could be in a relationship or at work or a project you're putting off. Now, separate the feeling from the action. Don't criticize the fear, just see it. Then ask, if I completely ignore the scary outcome, what would the right action be here? What would wisdom and justice tell me to do? Get clear on that action. The courage isn't in suddenly feeling bold. It's in taking that first small step toward the action while you bring the fear along with you. That's the practice. That's how remembering mortality, seen not as a threat but as a lens that makes things clear, builds a courage that can't be shaken, because it's built on who you decide to be. If you knew you had a year left, what would you stop waiting to do? A month, a week? This isn't about being morbid. It's the most practical question you can ask. It goes right to the center of why we put things off. That voice that says, "I'll do it tomorrow," meets its real answer. Memento Mori, remember you will die. That final deadline, when you hold it right, doesn't bring panic. It brings a deep sense of what's important. It makes you ask gently all the time, is what I'm doing right now connected to what I value? If it's not, then the Stoic move is to change course right then, not later. Now, Seneca called this our biggest mistake. He said we live as if we're going to live forever. We don't think about how fragile we are. We give out our time like it's endless. We spend it on distractions, on complaints, on things that don't touch our character, because we act like we have a limitless supply of tomorrows. But the deadline is real, and knowing that, if you see it as a truth and not a threat, it becomes what drives you. It turns someday into today. Think about an author with a book inside them. They have the idea, maybe an outline, maybe a chapter, but daily life is loud. The blank page is scary, so they tell themselves they'll really start next month when things are quieter. The project just sits in a drawer in their mind, labeled for later. Now imagine that author gets a diagnosis. Their timeline, once wide open, now has a visible end. What happens to the book? Almost always, the delay just disappears. The fear of the blank page is nothing next to the need to tell the story. The energy, the focus, the courage to write the hard parts, it all shows up. Not because things got easier, but because the value of doing it became completely clear. And this is a power you can use without a crisis, just by remembering the horizon is there. There's a simple exercise for this. When you wake up and plan your day, ask one question. If this were my last day, would I be okay with how I plan to spend it? Be honest, the answer might surprise you. You might see a day full of meetings that don't matter, or scrolling that adds nothing, or chores that could wait. You don't have to cancel everything and go do something wild, but you can make one change. Swap one trivial thing for one meaningful action. Call the person you've been meaning to call. Write the first paragraph of that idea. Have that quiet, kind talk you've been avoiding. Make that one change. That's the daily practice of courage, fed by remembering you're mortal. It's editing your life as you go, with the end in sight. So here's the challenge. Write down one thing you've been putting off. A project, an apology, a doctor's visit, a hard career move. Then look at your calendar, schedule it for today or tomorrow at the latest, and in the margin write the reason why. Not because it's easy or because you suddenly have time, but because your time, all of it, is the only thing you have to spend on what matters. Let that be the reason. The drive to be remembered. It's a powerful thing. We build monuments, we chase fame, we create art, hoping our name lasts a little longer. Psychologists have a term for this: immortality projects, symbolic acts. A fight against being forgotten. From a Stoic perspective, this is where courage often gets misdirected. It becomes a project for the future, an attempt to control what happens after we're gone. But that's the one thing we can't control. The Stoic question is simple, it cuts deep. Are you doing the good thing for the sake of the good itself, or are you doing it for the story that will be told about you later? One is virtue, the other is a transaction with an audience that may never show up. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, his private writings became a guide. He meditated on this constantly. He wrote to himself, reminding his soul about the river of time. Soon, he said, you will have forgotten all things, and soon all things will have forgotten you. Think of the years behind us, all those people who were celebrated in their age. Where are their praises now? Silence. He wasn't saying this to be bleak. He was using it as a tool for liberation. If even the most celebrated names are washed away by that river, then pinning your worth on being remembered, it's like building your house on the riverbank. An external foundation, unstable, so true Stoic courage shifts the focus entirely. It asks you to find your value in the action itself, in the integrity of the moment. Did you act with justice? Did you offer kindness? Did you face that difficulty with resilience? If the answer is yes, then the action is complete. Its value is realized right then. Whether anyone notices, whether it's recorded, whether it becomes part of your legacy, that's not the point. That's fate's business, and that's what frees you. From the quiet anxiety of legacy building, you're no longer performing for future historians. You're living for the quality of your own character, right now. Consider two paths. The first is the modern influencer, relentlessly curating a public image, measuring worth in likes, in lasting relevance. Their courage is real. It takes bravery to put yourself out there, but it's tied to an external metric. Something that can vanish overnight with a change in an algorithm or public opinion. Now consider a volunteer who quietly tutors children in their neighborhood every week. No fanfare, no public recognition. Their work is known only to a few families, which life requires a deeper courage, a more self-sufficient courage. The Stoic would argue for the second. That volunteer's reward is in the act of helping itself, in seeing a child understand a new concept. Their value isn't deferred to a future where they might be remembered as a philanthropist. It's collected in full, in the present moment, as virtue. This doesn't mean creating art is wrong or leading companies, not at all. It means examining the why. Are you writing the book because you have a truth to express, a beauty to create? That's a present-focused action, a virtuous one. Are you writing it primarily to be hailed as an author? To secure a place in literary history, that's an immortality project. The first brings peace, the second brings a hunger, a relentless, fragile hunger. So here's a practical test, a reflective prompt for your own actions. What good could you do today that you would be proud of, even if you knew you would never receive credit for it? Maybe it's a piece of honest feedback to a colleague that helps them but might not be thanked for. Perhaps it's picking up litter in your local park. Without posting about it, it could be listening, truly listening to someone without waiting for your turn to speak. The action is small. The shift in mindset is enormous. You are practicing courage divorced from reward. You are building an inner citadel of worth that no outside force can ever diminish. Because when you do good for its own sake, you are aligning completely with your best self. In that moment, and that is a legacy that matters, precisely because it was never meant for anyone else's eyes. Stoicism gets this reputation for being unfeeling, especially about death. But its view of grief is different. It never asked for a heart of stone. It was more like a map for getting through a storm. Stoics knew you'd feel that sting of loss. They called those the first movements, the tightness in your chest, tears that just come, that hollow feeling in a familiar room. That's not a failure. It's proof you're human, proof there was love there. The courage is in what comes next. The aim was to stop that natural sadness from turning into something else. A consuming passion, a grief that won't let go, that ruins your ability to function, to connect, to live with any virtue. That kind of grief, they said, is a choice. It's the pain of the loss plus a story you tell yourself about it. A story about injustice, a life cut short unfairly, a universe that's personally cruel. Seneca wrote a famous letter to a mother who lost her son. His consolation to Marcia, his advice was deeply compassionate. He didn't tell her to stop crying. He acknowledged the wound, but then he pointed to something else, an added suffering. He told her not to pile self-inflicted misery on top of the natural pain. We do that when we replay the last moments over and over, when we dwell on all the futures that won't happen now, when we let the loss make every day after feel like a lesser shadow. That, he suggested, is where we betray our own resilience. It dishonors the memory, too. It implies their greatest gift was a reason to stop living. So supporting someone with this compassion, it starts with a simple act. Presence, acknowledge the pain, share the natural sadness. There's real courage in sitting with someone's sorrow, not rushing to fix it with words, but the next step when it's time is a gentle reminder of life's continuity, not by saying they should be over it, by noticing a small, persistent sign of it together, the sun still coming through the window in the morning. A shared memory that brings a smile even with tears. You're not dismissing the loss, you're pointing to the fabric of life, the fabric that love was woven into. And that fabric is still there, still unbroken. This balance honors the person who's gone. It affirms that the love was part of the natural world, a world that continues. In cycles of connection and change, it takes courage to feel the full weight of the sadness without being crushed by it, to let the wound heal, even with a scar left behind. So here's a gentle prompt. Think of a past loss, a person, or the end of a chapter. Reflect on your grief for a moment. Was it proportionate? Did it honor the beauty of what was, and then let you gradually re-engage with what is? Or did it become, at times, a kind of self-torture, a story of injustice that kept you locked in a past you couldn't change? There's no judgment, just observation. And in that observation, you might find a new courage, the courage to remember with love but not with chains, the desire for a life without risk or loss. It's a desire for something that doesn't exist. Not in nature, we build our lives around avoiding that fact. We save for a rainy day. We avoid hard conversations to keep the peace. We pick the safer career, not the passionate one. We're building what feels like an impregnable fortress, and we believe somewhere deep down that if the walls are high enough and thick enough, we can keep uncertainty out. But the Stoic sees a different outcome. That fortress becomes a prison. The higher the walls, the more we have to lose, the more we have to protect, and the more terrifying the world outside becomes. This pursuit of permanent security, it doesn't get rid of fear. It magnifies it, because now you're not just afraid of hardship, you're terrified of losing the safety you built. Your courage gets mortgaged to maintain an illusion. Epictetus had a metaphor for this. He said life is like a banquet. You're a guest, dishes are brought to you. Some you enjoy, others not so much. The courageous guest takes what's offered with gratitude. They savor the good dishes while they're there, but they don't clutch the plate, demanding it stay forever. They don't follow the servant to the kitchen to steal the recipe. They understand the nature of a banquet. Courses come and courses go. To cling to any one dish is to miss the whole experience. It's to live in anxiety over an inevitable change. Now apply that to everything we try to hold onto: our health, our relationships, our status, our possessions. They're all dishes at the banquet, wonderful to have, painful to see go, but their temporary nature is written into the contract of being alive. Stoic courage is holding that plate lightly, enjoying the meal fully with deep gratitude, while knowing the servant will eventually come to clear it away. This is why the most vibrant lives often look, from the outside, the least secure. Deciding to travel to a new country alone, that's a risk. You could get lost, you could feel lonely, things could go wrong, but that's also where you discover resilience. Where you meet unexpected friends, where you see the world with fresh eyes. Starting a business is a gamble. It could fail. You could lose savings, but it's also where you learn your deepest capacities for problem solving, for creativity. Loving someone deeply is maybe the greatest risk. To open your heart is to hand someone the power to hurt it, but it's also the only path to the kind of connection that makes life feel meaningful. In each case, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acknowledging the risk, accepting the fragile, temporary nature of the endeavor, and choosing to step forward anyway. Because that step is where life is actually lived, not in the fortress but in the open field. So here's a question. Where in your life are you clinging to a plate? Where are you investing enormous energy to maintain a false sense of permanent security? Is it a job that feels soul-crushing but provides a steady paycheck? Avoiding a difficult health checkup because you fear bad news? Staying in a shallow relationship because being alone feels too uncertain? Identify that one area. Now, without any drastic action, just imagine what a more courageous approach might look like. Not a reckless leap, but a single, small step out of the fortress. What would it be to hold that part of your life more lightly, like a guest at the banquet, grateful for what's present while accepting its natural course? That single imaginative step, that's where real security begins, not in thicker walls, but in a more resilient, adaptable heart. To fear death for a Stoic means you've misunderstood where you are. You've mistaken yourself for something separate, an isolated piece, a little island of consciousness, but Stoic physics sees it differently. The whole cosmos is one living, rational being. They called that the logos, the divine reason behind everything, the movement of the planets, the way a tree grows, and your own reason, your ability to think and choose. That's not an accident. It's a conscious fragment of that universal logos, a spark from a much larger fire, and that changes how you see an ending. If you're a piece of the whole, then your death isn't annihilation. It's a return. The spark doesn't go out, it rejoins the flame. The drop doesn't vanish, it flows back into the ocean. Your individual consciousness might dissolve, but the substance of you, that rational piece, gets reintegrated. It goes back to the source. Seen like that, death isn't a tragedy. It's a natural process, a good process, the completion of a cycle. Marcus Aurelius thought about this for comfort. He wrote, "Consider the universe. Either it's a chaos of atoms, just a random scattering, or it's a unity, an order, a providence. If it's a chaos, why care about anything? Your end is just atoms rearranging. But if it's a unity, which he believed, then you should revere it. And if it's a unity, then your death is just a change within that perfect order. A change that serves the health of the whole. You're returning a borrowed piece to the system." That thought gave him courage to face his duties and his own mortality, not with despair, but with a sense of sacred participation. You can touch this feeling without complex philosophy. Think of a clear night far from city lights. You look up at the stars, that feeling that washes over you. It's not just wonder. It's a recognition of scale. You feel incredibly small, and yet not separate. You're made of the same stuff as those distant suns. You're here, conscious, able to look back at them and feel awe. That awe is a small-scale version of the Stoic perspective. It pulls you out of your personal story. It places you in a grand, beautiful narrative. Your worries, your fears about your reputation or your bank account, they don't disappear. But they're put into a context so vast their power to terrorize you just evaporates. They become what they are, temporary concerns on a temporary journey inside an eternal, unfolding process. So here's a reflective prompt. Take your biggest fear right now, the one that feels like a tight knot in your chest. Now, consciously place it within cosmic history. Billions of years have passed, stars born and died, continents shifted, countless lives lived. Your fear held against that backdrop. What is its true scale? This isn't to say your fear is meaningless. It's to see it for what it is, a passing weather pattern in the immense climate of a life. And your life itself is a brief, brilliant season in the life of the cosmos. When you can hold that view, even for a moment, a new kind of courage becomes available. The courage that comes from knowing you belong to something magnificent. And that your return to it isn't an end, it's a homecoming. Stoicism gives you a framework for sudden loss, but also for the courage it takes to face aging and sickness over time. That's where the philosophy stops being theory and starts testing your character. The gradual approach is its own challenge. It asks for a different kind of bravery, a sustained one. It's easy to be philosophically brave about something far off. The real work starts when that horizon begins moving toward you, day by day, a stiff joint. A difficult diagnosis, the slowing of a stride that used to feel effortless. That's when the dichotomy of control becomes practical. You don't control the disease process. You don't control the body's natural decline. Those are external events. They're part of the shared human condition. But what stays in your power, right up to your last breath, is your attitude. Your choice to complain or to accept with grace. Your decision to dwell on what's gone or to focus fiercely on what remains. Your continued pursuit of wisdom, of connection, of kindness. Dying well to the Stoics wasn't a separate event. It was the final chapter of living well, the ultimate expression of character. Seneca, in his later years, through poor health, wrote letters that show this. He didn't see illness as an interruption to his philosophical life. He saw it as the arena for its practice. In one letter, he says poor health can actually serve wisdom. It forces you to slow down, to listen, to prioritize. It strips away the trivial and leaves only the essential questions. He wrote about using convalescence not for self-pity, but for study. For writing, for conversations with friends. His body was confined, but his mind and spirit were free to expand. For Seneca, every day of life, regardless of its physical quality, was another day to demonstrate who he had chosen to be. Take a modern example, someone living with a progressive, chronic illness. The external facts are clear. Certain physical abilities will diminish over time. Some doors will close. The Stoic response isn't to rage against the closing doors. It's to turn with clear eyes toward the doors that remain open, to ask, what can I still do? I can still read, I can still learn, I can let my mind travel to new ideas, I can still write letters or emails, messages that offer encouragement. I can still listen with deep presence to a friend's story. I can still choose kindness with caregivers and family. I can still find moments for humor, for gratitude for a warm blanket or a bird outside the window. That focus shifts the entire narrative. The story stops being about what the illness is taking. It becomes a story about what the person is still giving from the core of their character. So here's a reflective prompt, not from fear but from preparation. What qualities of character could you choose to cultivate if you faced a long-term health challenge? Not the medical details, but the inner posture. Maybe it would be patience, to meet frustration without lashing out. Maybe grace, to accept help without shame. It could be humor, to find lightness on difficult days, or steadfast gratitude for the small, beautiful moments that persist. You don't need to wait for a diagnosis to start strengthening those muscles. You can start building that resilient, courageous character today, because that person, the one who faces limitation with dignity and focus, isn't someone you become only when you're ill. That's simply who you choose to be right now with the life you already have. None of us will become the perfect sage, but that Stoic ideal, it shows you where this is all headed. A life free from irrational fear, and a death free from it too. The sage is the fully realized human being, someone whose reason is completely aligned with the natural order. Their judgment is clear, their virtue can't be shaken, and from that understanding they face everything, even the end, with total tranquility. That first jolt of terror doesn't come. Not because they don't feel, but because they see the truth so clearly. There's nothing left to be afraid of. For us, this figure isn't a standard to fail. It's a guiding star. It shows the direction. Every time you use reason to calm a panic, every time you choose courage over comfort, you're not failing to be a sage. You're walking the path toward it. The Stoics looked to historical figures, models of that sage like courage. Socrates was the greatest example. He wasn't a Stoic, he came before. But his death, as Plato recorded it, was a masterpiece of calm. Condemned to drink hemlock, he spent his last hours in discussion with friends, talking about the soul, the afterlife. When the time came, he drank the poison, no hesitation, no anger, no self-pity. He had argued that a good person can't be harmed, only their body, and his final act demonstrated that belief. For the Stoics, Socrates didn't just teach virtue, he performed it all the way to the end. Another model was Cato the Younger, a Roman senator who opposed Julius Caesar. When Caesar's victory was certain, Cato chose to take his own life rather than live under tyranny. He spent his last night reading Plato on the soul. Then, with steady calm, he carried it out. The Stoics saw a man who valued his principles more than his biological life. His death was a final statement of his character. These stories aren't about encouraging the same end. They're studies in psychological freedom. They show what's possible when your highest value is your integrity, not just preserving your physical existence at any cost. The sage and these figures understand death as a natural return, so completely that the event itself has no power to disturb their peace. For us, the goal is progress, not perfection. You measure it in small, daily victories. Staying calm when a flight is cancelled instead of rage, that's practice. Meeting a difficult diagnosis with planning and presence, not just terror, that's practice. Having that hard conversation you've avoided because you value truth over comfort, that's practice. Each moment is a rehearsal. You're strengthening the muscles of reason and courage. The ones you'd call on in any crisis. You're moving closer to that ideal, step by step. So think of someone you admire for their composure, a public figure, a mentor, a family member, even a fictional character. What is it about their response, their quiet focus, maybe, their refusal to complain, their ability to find humor in the difficulty? Now consider what Stoic principles they might be embodying without knowing the word. Are they focusing only on what they can change? Have they mentally prepared for challenges? Are they seeing the situation from above, its small place in a larger story? By seeing the virtue in others, you make it more visible for yourself. That person becomes another guiding star, a living example that the sage calm isn't a myth. It's a quality of character being built in real time by people just like you. We spend so much of our lives collecting things we can't keep, chasing more money, a better title, a higher status. It feels like moving forward, but from the end, it can look like a strange race. The Stoics had a practice for this, remembering you'll die. It asks a quiet question. The stress, the compromise, the hours you trade for these things outside yourself, is it worth the cost of your one life? Seneca had great wealth, and he was its sharpest critic. He saw the trap. In his essay on the happy life, he wrote that wealth is a good servant but a terrible master. Chase it as an end, and you become its slave. Your peace depends on the market, your self-worth on a job title. Your courage gets spent defending a position, not building character. And then he offered the ultimate reminder for the wealthy. A shroud has no pockets. You arrive with nothing. You leave with nothing. All of it, the goods, the status, it stays behind. It was only ever on loan. This isn't a call for poverty. Stoicism is practical. You need a baseline, some security, some comfort to live well and focus on what matters. The real courage is in defining what enough is for you. And then having the strength to stop, to say, this is sufficient for my needs and my freedom. The pursuit of more beyond that point, it isn't ambition anymore. It's a form of forgetting that your time is the currency you're actually spending. Think of two paths. One person climbs the corporate ladder. Single-minded focus, 60, 70 hours a week for years. They get the promotions, the corner office, the salary, but they're perpetually stressed. Their health suffers, they miss their children growing up, their courage is used up in boardroom battles, protecting their turf. Another person decides early that enough is a comfortable living, one that allows for evenings and weekends free. They work hard with integrity, but they cap the pursuit. Their courage is social. It's the strength to be content when peers move into bigger houses. It's the bravery to invest the saved time not in more work, but in philosophy, in reading, in long walks, in being present for a friend, which life, from its final chapter, cultivated a richer inner wealth. So here's a practical exercise. Calculate it. Roughly, how many hours of your life do you trade for money in a week, in a year? Hold that number next to the Stoic reminder of your finite days. Does that trade feel aligned with what you value most? Does the pursuit bring you closer to being the person you wish to be? Or does it just provide more decorations for a life that's rushing by? The answer isn't about quitting your job, it's about conscious alignment, finding the courage to redirect even a fraction of that traded time toward what death cannot take. Your character, your wisdom, the love you gave and received, that's the wealth that endures. A Stoic might think about losing someone, even for a moment. It's a kind of negative visualization, but for the things you love most, you take that idea of rehearsing hardship and point it at what's fragile, your relationships. The good things you have right now. The point isn't to make yourself sad, it's to feel a deeper kind of gratitude, to see that everything is temporary, and that's not a reason to pull back. It's the reason to hold on more consciously, right now. If you imagine life without someone you love, it stings, it really hurts, but right after that pain, something else comes. A sharp wave of appreciation. You see their face clearly, you hear their laugh, you remember them with an intensity that ordinary days just don't have. This practice doesn't create the love, it wipes away the dust of habit that covers it up. It prepares you for a basic truth: everything in life is on loan. Especially people, we're just temporary keepers of these connections. Knowing the loan will end doesn't mean loving with half your heart. It means loving with your whole heart, wide open, because you understand the terms. Epictetus had advice that sounds harsh until you see the kindness in it. He said when you kiss your child good night, you should add a silent thought: tomorrow you may die. That wasn't a curse, it was an inoculation, a way to not take the moment for granted. He said we shouldn't kiss our children as if they're immortal, or as possessions we can never lose. To do that, he said, sets you up for a devastation worse than natural grief. It adds the shock of betrayal to the pain of loss. The Stoic way is different. You kiss them fully, with deep tenderness, while holding the awareness that they're fragile. That's not detachment. It's the most engaged, present form of attachment there is. You love without the illusion of permanence, and that's the only way to love what's actually alive. Try a quick exercise. Think of one person you love. A partner, a parent, a friend. For 30 seconds, imagine a reality where they're gone. Don't get stuck on how. Just feel the space their absence would leave. The quiet in a room they usually fill, an unanswered text. Then let that feeling go. Bring your focus back. They're here. You have this moment. Notice how your perception of them sharpens. Your gratitude for their existence feels more immediate, more tangible, and the next action becomes clear. Send the text you've been putting off. Give the hug. Say the words. The practice has done its work. It turned a feared possibility into present moment courage. The courage to connect. So here's a challenge. Do this visualization with something else, a different blessing. Your health, if you have it today, your home, your ability to walk in a park. Spend 30 seconds thinking about its loss. Then consciously engage with that blessing. Feel the strength in your limbs as you move. Appreciate the shelter of your room. Listen to the birds. See how the possible absence makes the reality of its presence more vivid. This is how you build a courageous heart, not by numbing yourself to loss, but by letting its possibility teach you how to truly, bravely love what you have while you have it. You know what you're staying in, you know it's not for you, but the thought of change, it's frightening. We cling to familiar shores, even when the water's gone bad. A career that drains you, a relationship gone cold, a city that isn't home anymore. We stay because the known, even if it's painful, feels safer than the unknown. But that safety, it's an illusion, and you pay for it with your one irreplaceable currency, time. Stoicism calls this a failure to live according to nature. Not just external nature, your own rational nature, your inner compass. It knows the direction. To ignore that, to procrastinate on a necessary change. That's a quiet denial, a denial of your mortality. It's acting as if you have forever to finally get around to being yourself. Seneca saw this pattern. He wrote about the person who postpones living. They work a job they tolerate for decades, telling themselves real life begins at retirement. They save their passions, their curiosity, their peace for a distant someday. And then, Seneca observes, when that day arrives, they're often too old, too tired, too set in their ways to enjoy it. They spent their life preparing to live and forgot to live. He called it the greatest folly, to spare your life only to lose it. The clarity that comes from an awareness of death, it cuts through that. It asks a brutal question, liberating, if not now, when. Consider someone in a lucrative corporate role. The title is impressive, the salary provides comfort. But the work feels hollow, a series of tasks disconnected from any deeper meaning. The thought of leaving, it triggers a cascade of fears, financial insecurity, social judgment, the terror of starting over. Now let that person sit with the Stoic reminder. Your time here is finite, uncertain. You are trading the days of your one life for this. Is the trade still worth it? For many, that clarity becomes the catalyst. It provides the courage to step off the expected path, to retrain for service work. Teaching, maybe healthcare, to start a small business aligned with a long-held passion. The income might be less, but the life feels infinitely more their own. The decision isn't made from recklessness, it's from a profound realignment. It's the courage to change course, fueled by a simple truth. The course you're on is leading away from your own nature. So here's a reflective prompt, a personal one. If you were guaranteed 5 more years of life, what would you change immediately, not in a distant future? Now, would you leave that job? Would you end that draining relationship? Would you move to a place that calls to you? Sit with that answer, then ask the second question. The more important one, what's stopping you from starting that change now? Is the obstacle truly external, a wall you cannot climb, or is it internal? A story you tell yourself about safety, about obligation, about what is possible. The awareness of an ending, it doesn't create the desire for change. It reveals the cost of staying the same, and in that revelation you find the courage to begin. For Stoics, courage on its own without justice, that's just recklessness. And justice, treating people fairly, with kindness, that takes real courage, especially when you hold in mind that everyone is dying. That's the connection between these two virtues. Courage is the strength to act. Justice is where you point that strength, and knowing our time is limited, that's what creates the urgency. It makes you ask why you'd wait. Why put off mending something or speaking up? Later isn't a luxury you really have. Marcus Aurelius kept coming back to this. He wrote about seeing others not as obstacles but as family, as fellow travelers on the same short journey. He told himself to work for the common good. That line of his, what's not good for the hive is not good for the bee, it points right to this. Your well-being is tied to the whole. To act unjustly, to harm the hive for some short-term gain, that's harming yourself. But to act for the hive, that usually means standing against the current. It means personal risk, and that's where courage comes in. Consider the quiet courage justice asks for. It's the family member who steps into a long-running dispute to mediate. They know they'll take anger from both sides, risk being blamed. There's no trophy for that. the reward is just the fragile chance for peace, or the colleague who advocates for a junior employee being treated unfairly, even if it might annoy a powerful manager. They risk their own standing, their comfort. They do it because it's right and because they see that person's career, their finite time, being worn down by an injustice. Even smaller acts carry this weight. Letting someone merge in traffic when you're in a hurry, giving back extra change a cashier handed you by mistake. Listening fully to someone's story without just waiting to talk about your own. These are just actions, and each one needs a sliver of courage, the courage to put fairness above your own minor convenience. The courage to be kind in a world that often rewards the opposite. When you set these choices against the backdrop of mortality, their significance sharpens. That person you cut off in traffic, the cashier you could have shortchanged, they're living a story with the same final chapter as yours. Your brief interaction is a line in their narrative. Will it be a line of friction or one of grace? The just action acknowledges their humanity. It says, I see you, your time matters too. So, a practical prompt. Look at your sphere of influence, your home, your work, your community. Find one situation that feels unjust. Maybe it's a pattern of gossip you're part of. A responsibility you've been avoiding that burdens others. Standing by while someone gets marginalized. Then, think of one courageous, just action you could take this week to address it. It doesn't have to be grand, a private apology, a public word of support, choosing to stop participating in the unfair pattern. The action itself is the point. By doing it, you align two virtues. You exercise courage in the service of justice. And you do it now, not someday, because the clock you share with everyone is quietly ticking. The thought arrives, I will die, and then the feeling comes, the terror, but between them there's a space. That's where the practice is, the discipline of assent. It's the most direct tool you have to stop a natural fact from becoming a daily paralysis. Epictetus gave us the principle. We're disturbed, he said, not by things, but by the judgments we make about things. The event itself is neutral. It's the story we wrap around it that causes the suffering. That's especially true with thoughts about mortality. The Stoic move is to pause in that space. To catch the initial impression before you give it your full, unquestioning agreement. Here's how it works with the ultimate fear. The bare impression is a simple statement. My life will end, that's a truth. It's a natural event, as universal as a leaf falling, but our minds rarely stop there. We instantly add a judgment. An emotional coloring. We attach words like catastrophic, unfair, terrifying. We spin a story about loss, about non-existence, about all we'll miss. That added story is what we're actually afraid of. Not the fact itself, but the catastrophic narrative we've built on top of it. The discipline asks you to separate the two, to assent to the fact because it's true and part of nature's order. And to withhold assent from the terrifying story because that's just an opinion and a flawed one. So when the cold wave of that fear rises, you pause. You don't fight it, you examine it. You might say to yourself quietly, it is true that I will die. This is a natural process. My task is not to prevent it, but to live well until then. You strip the thought back to its plain, neutral core. You see it not as a personal tragedy waiting in ambush, but as the universal horizon of every human journey. This doesn't make the feeling vanish instantly. Feelings have their own rhythm, but it robs the thought of its power to hijack your mind. It turns a source of panic into a simple reminder of context. Try this with a smaller anxiety, a more common one. Maybe you worry about a presentation at work. The initial impression is, I have to speak in front of people. The added judgment might be, and I will humiliate myself, and everyone will think I'm incompetent, and it will ruin my career. The discipline asks you to see only the first part as the fact you must work with. I have to speak, the rest is a story, a prediction of disaster. You can prepare for the speaking. You cannot prepare for a story that hasn't happened and likely never will. By assenting only to the fact, your energy goes to practical preparation, not to spiraling dread. Apply this now. Think of a recent anxiety about your future. It could be about health, finances, a relationship. Now dissect it. What is the bare, neutral fact at its center? Perhaps it is, my job is unstable right now. Now, what is the judgmental story you are adding? That I will end up destitute, that I am a failure, that no one will help me. See how much heavier the story is than the fact. The fact invites problem solving. The story invites only fear. Your courage grows in the space where you learn to dwell with the fact and let the story drift away like a cloud. This is the daily mental training, the one that builds a resilience no external event can shake. A good author knows when a chapter is done, they end it. A clean break on the page so the next part of the story can start. Our lives are written that way too, not one long story but a series of chapters. Each one has an opening, a middle, and an end it needs. Seeing death as the final period of the whole book is one thing, but the real courage, the daily kind, comes from seeing the smaller endings inside it. And having the strength to write them, we hold onto finished chapters, an identity from our 20s that doesn't fit anymore, a friendship that's run its course but we keep it going out of habit. A career that once defined us and now feels like a costume we've outgrown. Holding on like that isn't just nostalgia, it's a quiet denial, a refusal to see that all things move toward their natural conclusion. Even the phases of our own story, ending a chapter is a rehearsal. It's practice for the ultimate letting go. It prepares you for the final transition by honoring all the smaller ones along the way. Seneca talked about life as a play. He said the point isn't for the play to be long, but for it to be performed well. For the whole performance to have integrity, you have to know your lines in each act. And you have to know how to leave the stage when your part is done. Exiting with dignity is part of a good performance. Clinging to the spotlight after your scene is over, or refusing to let the curtain fall on an act that's finished, that ruins the drama. For everyone, think of the practical chapters, quitting a stable job to pursue something that feels more authentic. That's ending a chapter. It's terrifying. You're closing the book on a known salary, a familiar routine, an identity. The blank page of what comes next is daunting, but the courage to write that ending is what makes the next chapter possible. It's an act of faith in your own growth, or ending a long-term relationship that's grown stagnant, where love has faded into routine or into resentment. Staying because it's familiar, because you've invested years, because you're afraid of being alone, that's refusing to end the chapter. It's forcing yourself to reread the same pages. The courageous ending, painful as it is, honors the truth of the story. It lets both people move into narratives where they might thrive again. Even retirement from a lifelong role is a chapter's end. Stepping away from being the provider, the expert, the caretaker, redefining yourself when a core part of your identity is complete. So look at the story you're living right now. Find one chapter that feels complete, its energy is spent, its lessons have been learned. Maybe it's a volunteer commitment that now feels like an obligation. Perhaps it's a grudge you carry, a story of being wronged that you keep rereading. It could be a daily habit like mindless scrolling that fills pages but adds no depth. Once you've named it, think of one small step toward closing it. For the volunteer role, a conversation to pass the torch. For the grudge, a letter you never send, just to declare the story over for yourself. For the habit, deleting one app for a week. The step isn't a dramatic finale. It's about consciously placing that period on the page to make room for the sentence, the paragraph, the new chapter waiting to begin. A lot of fear is about the body ending, the pain, the decay, that final quiet. The Stoics tried to see the body in another way, not as the self, but as the temporary place the self lives. They made a sharp division between the vessel and the pilot. The real you to them is the ruling part, the hegemonicon. That's your reason, your judgment, your ability to choose. Your will, the body, is just the instrument it uses, a borrowed instrument made from earth and water and air, given by nature for a while. You take care of an instrument. You maintain it, you try to use it well, but you are not the instrument. If it gets scratched or wears down or finally stops working, that's a change in the tool. It isn't the destruction of the musician. That view is a strong source of courage. It means your worth, your character, your virtue, they aren't held hostage by what happens to the body. A body can be sick or hurt or getting old. It can be stuck in a bed, but the ruling part inside, if you've trained it, can stay steady. It can choose patience instead of complaint, gratitude over self-pity, courage instead of despair. The body's fate is one story. The story of your character is another, and you get to write that second one all the way to the end. Marcus Aurelius came back to this idea again and again like a mantra. He'd remind himself his body was just a bit of flesh, some breath, and the ruling intelligence. He wrote that you are a little soul carrying a corpse. The phrase is harsh, but his aim was gentle. It was to pull his identity back from the physical shell and anchor it in the awareness that watched the shell. He observed that even if his body were cut or burned, the mind inside could keep its own calm, judging nothing good or bad that happened to the flesh. This wasn't ignoring physical feeling. It was a radical shift of where the self resides. Think about two different athletes. The first one identifies completely with physical skill. Their speed, their strength, their perfect form. Their whole sense of value is tied to how the body performs. When an injury comes or age slows them down, it feels like a personal erasure, a loss of who they are. The second athlete values something deeper. They love the discipline of training, the strategy of the game, the team camaraderie, the integrity of good sportsmanship. Those are qualities of character. When their physical prime passes, those inner qualities don't disappear. They can be redirected into coaching, into mentoring, into a new chapter built on the same core strengths. The first athlete's courage is fragile, depending on a body that will change. The second's courage is resilient, rooted in a self that lasts beyond the body's limits. So here's a way to feel that difference. Take a moment and name 3 qualities you value most about yourself. Just mentally list them. Now look at each one. Ask how many depend on the condition of your physical body, your looks, your athletic ability, your energy level, and ask how many are qualities of character. Your humor, your loyalty, your curiosity, your resilience, your ability to listen. That simple list can show you something. It shows where you've anchored your identity. The more you have on that second list, the more your core self is built on a foundation that illness or age or physical change can't wear away. That's the Stoic detachment. It doesn't lead to neglect, it leads to a deep, unshakable courage. You care for the vessel, but you live from the pilot's seat. Stoicism can feel like a solitary practice. But talking about death with other people, that can create a kind of shared strength. We often treat these thoughts as a private burden, something we carry alone. And when we keep those fears hidden, they tend to grow. They become personal demons. They whisper that our anxiety is unique, that our fragility is a secret flaw. But in a community that holds a Stoic view, those whispers start to fade. The conversation itself becomes a light. It normalizes what we all face. It turns a solitary dread into a shared human condition. And from that common ground, a different courage can grow, one that's nurtured by support, by a gentle accountability. Think of a small group, a book club maybe, reading Seneca's letters together. They're not there to be morbid. They're meeting to talk about how an ancient philosophy applies to modern worries. Career changes, parenting, questions of purpose. And as they discuss Seneca's advice on time and loss, something shifts. One person shares a fear about a career risk. another talks about caring for an aging parent. In that space of shared understanding, the abstract Stoic principle becomes a tool, a lived tool. The group doesn't offer empty reassurance. Instead, they might gently challenge each other. Is that risk really about external failure, or is it a chance to practice courage? Is the difficulty with a parent just an obstacle, or is it an arena to practice patience? To practice love, this is the collective memento mori in action. By reminding each other of life's finite nature, the group's focus turns away from complaint toward action, away from fear toward purposeful living, and this mirrors what the Stoics themselves did. Seneca's most profound works are letters written to his friend Lucilius. They were building philosophical resilience through dialogue. In one letter, Seneca writes, "While we wait for life, life passes." He wasn't just musing alone. He was inviting a friend into that reflection, creating a shared commitment to not waste their days. Those letters were a form of community, a way to strengthen each other's resolve across a distance. They held each other accountable to the principles they professed. You can start building this in simple ways. It doesn't require a formal group. With one trusted friend, you could begin a weekly courage challenge. Each of you commits to one small action that week, something that scares you but aligns with your values. It might be having a difficult conversation you've avoided, or finally starting a creative project you've postponed. When you check in, you don't just report success or failure. You discuss the internal resistance you felt. You use the Stoic framework to examine it. Was the fear about something within your control? How did the awareness of your limited time influence your decision to act? This shared practice turns abstract courage into a tangible experiment, a weekly experiment. It gives you a companion for the journey, someone who understands the language you're trying to speak. So here's a direct challenge, a step toward that collective strength. Share one insight from this with someone you trust. It doesn't have to be a grand lecture. You might simply say, "I was thinking about how we all have a limited amount of time, and it made me wonder why I've been putting off that difficult thing." Then ask them a question. How does thinking about time change how you see your own current challenge? Just opening that door can begin to transform a private anxiety into a conversation. A conversation about what matters, and in that shared space you might find the encouragement you need to take a braver step forward together. My time is limited. It's uncertain. Today is a gift, not a guarantee. That's the thought to hold in the morning, just for a minute before the phone, before the day starts. It's not about fear, it's an agent, a focusing agent. It asks what actually matters today. It clears the clutter before anything even begins, then planning the day. Look at the list, apply the sorting, the dichotomy of control for each task, each worry. Sort it. Is this within my power or outside it? My effort is mine. My attitude, my preparation, those are mine. The outcome isn't. Other people's reactions, external events, those are not mine. This sorting takes 2 minutes. It directs courage. You commit energy to what you can influence. You practice letting go of the rest. That's how resilience builds against frustration. Then a brief visualization, negative visualization. Pick one current blessing, something simple, your health today, a loved one nearby, the roof overhead. For 30 seconds, imagine life without it. Feel that pang, then let it go. Now, engage with the reality. Feel gratitude for a working body. Send a quick message of appreciation. Notice the safety of home. This isn't morbid, it's an exercise in loving what you have while you have it. It fuels the courage to cherish things, to protect what's important. In the evening, a short reflection, 2 questions. Where did I act with courage today? Maybe a small act of integrity, speaking up when it was easier to stay quiet. And where could I have been more courageous? No harsh judgment, just observation. This review takes a minute or 2. It turns the day into a training ground. You see progress, you see where to strengthen resolve tomorrow. To anchor it, choose one Stoic quote, a daily mantra. write it on a card. Marcus Aurelius has one. It is not death that a man should fear. He should fear never beginning to live. Read it in the morning. Let it sit. It reframes the practice. The point of remembering mortality is to push you into life. Into bold living, authentic living, courageous living. The whole routine takes 5 minutes, focused minutes. Consistency is everything. 3 days of this creates a shift. You approach decisions with more clarity. You waste less time on trivial anxieties. You find a steadier bravery in small moments. So the challenge is to design your own ritual. A 5-minute ritual. Use this skeleton but make it yours. What time of day works best? Which Stoic quote resonates right now? What one blessing will you appreciate this week? Commit to trying it for 3 days. Notice the subtle change in how you move through the world. When you remember the frame, the picture within it becomes more vivid. And you become more courageous in how you choose to paint it. The Stoic view of death isn't a shadow. It's a source of light. It takes a universal truth, something that can be a source of fear, and turns it into a framework. A framework for courage, daily courage. We started with Memento Mori, that gentle nudge, the one that pulls you into the present moment. Then we moved to the dichotomy of control. That practical sorting, it builds resilience, it helps you weather the storms, and then Amor, Fati, the love of your fate, which asks you to embrace the whole story. The joy, the hardship, the final page, to say yes to all of it. And what that journey shows is a simple truth. Courage isn't a single leap. It's not one heroic act. Courage is a muscle. You build it, you strengthen it through small choices, conscious choices you make every day, choices you make because you're aware. Quietly aware that your time is precious and uncertain. When you remember that frame, that your time is finite, you stop waiting. You stop waiting for a perfect, fearless version of yourself to show up. You start acting with the courage you already have right now, in the life you're already living. To bring it together, there's a thought from Seneca. He wrote that it's not that we have a short time to live, it's that we waste a lot of it. Life is long enough, he said. A generous amount is given for great achievements. If we invest it well, his words are a call to arms, not against death, against the waste, against a life lived in distraction, in fear. He's reminding us. The shortness of the candle is what makes its flame brilliant, worth caring for. So as we close, here's a prompt. Look back on the principles, choose one. Just one to act on before today ends. It could be a pause, a single, mindful breath with Memento Mori. It could be sorting one worry, using the dichotomy of control. Or it might be a small act of courage, having that difficult conversation you've put off because you choose to value your finite time over temporary comfort. The path to a courageous life is paved with those steps, small, deliberate steps. We'd like to hear which idea resonated. Share your chosen principle in the comments. Or a moment of courage, your story could be a spark for someone else. If this framework was helpful, consider subscribing. We explore more pathways like this. Practical wisdom for building resilience, for living with purpose. Thank you for walking this path of reflection. Go forth, live your finite days with boldness. With heart.